When Steve Bannon said the media is the opposition party to conservatives and Republicans in America, well, that was really all that needed to be said. Whatever else his good points are or his bad points are, this statement, this observation, this flash of brilliance is something we really need to pay attention to, because nobody said it better. I mean, just look at what just happened this week. Trump went in to get his physical from his doctor, and he said, hey, put a cognitive test in there. So Trump passed the cognitive test like, perfect. He scored a perfect score on his cognitive abilities. Because, we've seen the news reports on every single major media outlet in the country, with the exception of maybe Fox News. I'm not sure, but they're referring to it too. All the reporters are saying, Trump's crazy. He's not mentally stable. He really believes all that crap about low taxes, low regulation, make America great, bring back jobs. What is he, crazy? What does he think he has, a magic wand? So when Trump went in to get his test, they gave him the cognitive test, and it all came back fine. That didn't matter. Didn't matter to any of the reporters. Jim Acosta and April Ryan, the head of the opposition party. It's weird where the opposition party now gets offices in the White House. That's weird, isn't it? Anyway, there are just two of the many people going around saying, that test, that doesn't mean anything. The cognitive test, that testimony from the White House physician who used to be Obama's physician, giving Trump a clean bill of physical and mental health doesn't mean anything, because I'm Jim Acosta, I'm April Ryan. I know better than they do. Trump is a senile, bad person. And so now Acosta and April Ryan, all they do is follow Trump around, and they yell questions at Trump. Are you a racist? Are you a racist? April Ryan was following Trump around on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. birthday. He had some of King's relatives in the house. And that's all you could hear is April Ryan going, Trump, are you a racist? Trump, are you a racist? Ditto for Jim Acosta of CNN during a recent photo op. It's all, Trump basically got impatient with him at some point, after Acosta just kept shouting out, "Are you a racist? Are you a racist?" And he had him removed from the room. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president must bow down to the press. There's nothing in the Constitution that says these guys the White House has to give them an office or let them into the press conferences. They can do their news. They can do it anywhere they want, any way they want, but nothing says Trump has to help them. It didn't matter. All these reporters are screaming that, that test doesn't matter. Trump has dementia. Of course, Ann Coulter, the brilliant and the beautiful Ann Coulter, she put out a tweet where she said, here's what the media says. Here's what the media wants to know. Were there any tests run on the president's brain for racism? At first blush, that sounds like kind of a rhetorical question, right? But, Ann's done as much reporting on this as anybody in the country on these bogus academic studies, always to purport that white people are just racist and black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism. And so that comment existed on two levels. A, it was true, but B, it was also funny. And so look, why don't we get a little bit into that, because there are actual tests to see if you are a racist, and I'm going to give you that test. Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Here we talk about black mob violence, black on white criminality, black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on Asian, black on kitties, puppies, and turtles, all wildly out of proportion. And here we talk about the reporters, public officials, and other people who are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. That's what we do here. We expose the greatest lie of our generation, the myth of black victimization, all without racism, without rancor, without apology. That's what we're going to do in this podcast right here. And so you guys have seen the headlines many, many times, right? It's like, well, this guy's a racist. That's a racist. They did this study. Yeah, they're racist. I mean, this is like a favorite academic preoccupation now. It turns out there's a test for an academic test. No, there's an actual test for racism. It's called the symbolic racism test. I'm going to give it to you in a minute. But first, why don't we take a look at some of the things that the academics do with these racist tests for racism, how loosey-goosey they are, how they're just manufacturing these tests, how it's very difficult, if not impossible, to replicate these tests, but yet everybody holds them up as if they are the sign of God. According to studies, Colin, don't you know the studies where it showed that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere? Colin, what did you know the studies? What do you know the numbers, Colin? Here's the way it works. Behind every denier of racial violence is a bogus academic report that shows white racism is big and getting bigger all the time. I mean, so actually they're kind of schizoid about it, right? And one day they're saying this black criminality does not exist, wildly out of proportion. The next day they're saying, well, yeah, it exists out of proportion, but here's why. So they kind of haven't made their mind up about a lot of this yet. But that doesn't matter. Nobody feels the need to resolve these conflicts with this cognitive dissonance. They just hold two wildly opposing points of view inside their own mind, knowing that when it comes to race, very few people are going to challenge them in the public square to resolve these ridiculously opposing ideas. No reporter ever got fired for being down with the cause in this country. You know, when I think of bogus academic studies, my favorite ones come from comes from talking about using drugs. And you can hear John Conyers. He's the senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Is he even still in Congress? Did he resign? He was the guy that was, all these women came out and said, yeah, Conyers was a bad guy, sexually harassed me. Anyway, so Conyers, he represents the Detroit area. And anyway, so he's all about criminal justice reform, the idea that too many black people are in prison for no reason whatsoever, and the cops are picking on black people, they ignore white people, and the big thing they use is pot. They say white people and black people use the same amount of marijuana, except for a very long time, black people are getting arrested for it and white people are not. The first time I heard that, I said, what doesn't sound right? Because if you ask a cop, they'll tell you that black pot use among black people, at least in this little town, lots of other little towns, way higher among black people than white people. And so I thought, well, how do you know? I mean, how do you know who's using pot or any other drug? Well, the way it works is the census, turns out they don't know. They're just guessing. And here's how they guess. The Census Department, every 10 years, they do their census, right? Well, they have something I call a super census. They pick out a subset, 3, 4, 5,000 people, whatever the number is, and they go to your house. A random sample of the population, they go to your house, and they'll ask you questions for an hour. Lots and lots of questions. They really want to get all this information because, statistically speaking, if you get people at random, the random sample is going to be a very good representation of the entire population, correct? That's what statistics are. If you put 1,000 jelly beans in a jar, if you pull out 100 and you count black and white, you're going to know you're going to have a really good idea of how many black and white jelly beans are in the jar by the time you get to the 100th jelly bean. By the way, if you understand what I just said, congratulations. You know more about statistics than many people with degrees in statistics. Anyway, so they go into the home, and they sit down, and they ask you a lot of questions, and they look you in the eye and go, so, do you use marijuana? Oh, they go, no. Some people say yes. Some people say no. But here's what so this is called, that's how they know if you use pot or not. They ask you. It's called self-reporting. Got a huge chapter on this in Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. And so the idea behind self-reporting is, we have to depend on these people to tell the truth. Well, it turns out self-reporting is also the object of lots of studies, and self-reporting is an absolutely unreliable way to figure out what's going on with anybody about anything. I mean, down at Johns Hopkins, they did a study on blood pressure, and they were doing a study, had all these volunteers, they got their blood out, and somebody said, well, let's just do a study on pot too. We've got their blood, we're going to know if they're going to tell us the truth or not. So they went in there and asked people, I said, hey, so blah, blah, blah. So you smoke pot? They go, oh, hell no, man, hell no. Well, it turns out like 6 times more people smoke pot than admitted to it. Same with cocaine in other studies. And the one big dividing line, and the studies are very explicit about this. One big dividing line, there are 2 indicators of who tells the truth on these tests. One is, are you black? If you are, you're not telling the truth. 2, are you recently out of prison? You're not telling the truth. So to me, again, this is one of those things where I feel a little chagrined to point out the obvious. But if you're going to deal with a person's drug habits or gambling habits or addictions, you simply cannot rely on the word of the people using the drugs or doing the gambling or any of these other bad things. So if you want to know if somebody's using drugs, you got to take a blood test. You got to take a piss test. You got to take a hair test. You got to take a million other tests that I don't even know about to see for sure what they're doing with drugs. Asking them, that doesn't work. But that doesn't matter. This piece of information that white people, black people use the same amount of drugs, but black people are getting picked on. This is part of the popular culture. Every reporter in America believes that. Just go Google black and white drug use. They'll say, oh, it's the same. It's the same, God. We know. How do you know? Well, I know. I saw a study on it. No, nobody goes back and pulls the thread. And then once you see the study, start pulling more threads. Anything based on self-reporting is bogus. And the people that do studies on self-reporting tell you why. That's not the only way they could figure out like who is racist and what is racist. I mean, apparently these editors of all these magazines all over the country, they know all about it. How about this fairy tale from Science Daily? This was picked up by editors all across the country. I mean, if you have a magazine, it might be the worst magazine in the world. As long as it has a cool name, editors are going to pick it up. Science Daily. Here's the headline. Smart enough to know better. Intelligence is not a remedy for racism. This is how another magazine interpreted the exact same story. How smart people hide their racism. Smart people are just as racist as their less intelligent peers. They're just better at concealing their prejudice, according to the University of Michigan. Quote, high-ability whites are less likely to report prejudiced attitudes, bingo, and more likely to say they support racial integration in principle, but they are no more likely than lower-ability whites to support open housing laws and are less likely to support school busing and affirmative action programs. Oh, now it's getting good. New Yorker magazine, they love to do these racism articles. They did a story where they showed it's almost like I had an image of Clockwork Orange. They sit you in a room, they pin your eyes open, you show some pictures, you start correlating words and pictures. And then together, what the result is, quote, together our results provide strong converging evidence for the role of perceptual bias as a mechanism through which economic scarcity enhances discrimination and contributes to racial disparities. Perceptual bias. Oh, yeah. They're just like, they slip these words in on you. They slip these terms. They slip these concepts in on you as if they're chiseled in granite. When really they're just a little something a little child drew on the sand at the beach with a popsicle stick. The very first wave that comes along washes it away. In Chicago, and everybody's in on the act now. In Chicago, one of the railroad workers' unions, they used a University of Chicago report called Density for All, Linking Urban Form to Social Equity. Here comes the money quote. The disparity in commute times for low-wage African-American workers in Chicago, as compared to others, is the product of a country with a huge and growing urban population, yet no serious urban transportation agenda except to benefit the rich. Wow. Then, of course, let's head over to the NEA, the National Education Association, basically the teachers union, one of the most powerful unions in America, for two reasons. One, most teachers are very, very goofy. And two, they've got a lot of members, and members kick in a lot of money. Here's the lead sentence from an article in a recent NEA journal called, "Is Higher Education Propping Up White Privilege?" White privilege still exists in America. Did you doubt it? The latest proof is an extensive study from Georgetown University. Shows that, this blockbuster study shows that black students are underrepresented in the most selective schools and are more likely to go to open access schools. Quote, the report's authors acknowledge that their findings do serve as a justification for race-based admissions in colleges. They gave away the game with that admission. Let's do one more example. Then I'm going to give you the same racism test that a lot of these people get. You may have seen this kind of study one way or another. They'll say, well, these conservatives do this, and that means that's linked to racism. I mean, here's one headline. Study links white racism with opposition to gun control. And the researchers say white people who hold, quote, implicitly anti-black attitudes, unquote, are more likely to support that crazy-ass Second Amendment. But, so that's the question, like, whoa. What are these implicitly anti-black attitudes? Remember, implicit means kind of like, under the radar. Explicit would be like, hey, I believe all black people should be put on a boat, sent back to the North Pole or the South Pole or anywhere in between. I don't really care. Or the Klan is the greatest organization in the history of America. But the implicit ones are, that's the big thing now. I mean, this was like all over the election in 2016. Hillary Clinton and her cronies, Bernie and everybody, all the libs were going around talking about implicit bias, subconscious bias, unconscious bias. That's the reason what we need all these legal remedies like affirmative action, cashless bail, criminal justice reform, educational reform. All these reform basically means giving black people more free stuff. That's what reform means, by the way. See, this was a huge deal in 2016. It hasn't gone away. It's weird. It's like what people think now is a justification for all these really severe and far-reaching and expensive legal remedies. But it's not even what they say or what they do. Because here's what the attitude of the academics is. In that last study, it's, quote, these research, not quote yet, the researchers found, quote, racist attitudes that are not overt but nevertheless color one's view of the world. They call it symbolic racism. Or what I say, in my terms, in technical terms, we just made all this silly stuff up. So here's what symbolic racism is. Participants are asked to answer 4 questions taken from the symbolic racism scale. They express their level of agreement or disagreement on a 1 to 5 scale with statements like this. So they just ask you some questions. I mean, pretty simple questions. You'll see where this thing's going in a big hurry. Quote, it's really a matter of some people not trying hard enough. If blacks would only try harder, they could be just as well off as whites. That's one statement. And the professors, since you're the lab rat, they're going to ask you to, agree or disagree with that on a 1 to 5 scale. Irish, Italian, Jewish, and many other minorities overcame prejudice and worked their way up. Blacks should do the same. Sound reasonable? Or does that sound like the secret code word to get into a Klan meeting? Here's another statement they'll ask you. How much discrimination against blacks do you feel there is in the United States today? Limiting their chances to get ahead? Here's another one. Generations of slavery and discrimination have created conditions that make it difficult for blacks to work their way out of the lower class. Here's another one. Over the last few years, blacks have gotten less than they deserve. So you give people all these loaded statements, and you're going to flunk the test. You're going to be branded on one level or another if you believe that everybody in this country has a place to go. If you believe everybody can make something out of themselves, they apply themselves, if they get a skill, they figure out what they are good at, if they take personal responsibility for themselves. I know, it's like, is this like a secret? Did I break into the world's biggest bank vault and, break open the safe and pull out this little piece of paper with the secret on it? No, not at all. This is the biggest the biggest well-known secret in the world. It's a secret that everybody who believes in black victimization rejects. Okay, these 5 things. Okay, if you want to give yourself a chance to make something out of yourself in this country, all you got to do with these 5 things: stay out of jail, graduate from high school, don't have a child out of wedlock, stay off drugs, and get a job. Any job. Start with those 5 things. Do they seem really difficult? Start from there. You'll do fine. I guess we could make up lots of more questions for this test of racial, what's it called, symbolic racism. By the way, if you look up the term symbolic racism on Google, it's kind of a thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, a lot of people know what that is. Here's one convenient way of summarizing it. Symbolic racism is the expression or endorsement of 4 specific themes or beliefs. They are 1. Blacks no longer face much prejudice or discrimination. 2. The failure of blacks to progress results from their unwillingness to work hard enough. 3. Blacks are demanding too much too fast. 4. Blacks have gotten more than they deserve. These are perfectly legitimate, valid, and items that are easy to prove as true. But if you believe them as true, you get branded with the R brand for racist. I mean, if we're not living in a country where people who work, save, and invest can get ahead, what kind of country? What kind of country are we living in? Where can you do that better than here? Where? If you have a job, yeah, people do ask you to show up for the job. If you have a job, yeah, you're not going to get Kwanzaa off, the 7 days of Kwanzaa. No, you're not allowed to do a lot of cocaine or methamphetamine or pot. For some reason, they hurt people's personal productivity. Yes, you are not only expected to graduate from high school, you are expected to learn something in high school. What people learn in high school, the most valuable lessons in high school, they're not even teaching in a lot of black high schools. Is anybody learning personal responsibility? Is anybody learning anything else but institutional racial resentment? Over and over and over, that's what we see in these black high schools. And the kids go out into the workforce and they're all about racial hostility, racial resentment. They come back in a couple of years later and they go, man, it's really tough out there. Nobody likes black people. That's because you spent the last 5 years of your life doing nothing but telling everybody that you suck at your job because of white racism. You know, if you have one of these degrees from a college, if you get into a college because you're black and your SATs are really low, but they let you in under a special program, you know, you can run from that program for a while, but once you're in there, at some point you have two choices. A, flunk out, or B, because you're in over your head, or B, start taking some soft course like African American Studies, where everybody passes with flying grades as long as you're all about white racism. Okay, you can do that in college. You can do that in the workforce if you work for the government. If you work for the post office, if you work for a school, if you work for the federal government, if you work for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. But out in the real world, if you're working for a real company, people, most jobs out there, they are going to ask you to contribute something. They are going to ask you to make a difference. A lot more places are measuring what everybody's up to. So just showing up and bitching about white people is not really considered a marketable skill, no matter how often you try to get your coworkers to take the test of symbolic racism. No matter how often you try to convince them they all suck and they're all keeping you down because, you know, they think they're smart and they're trying to shame you because you're not as smart as them. We're going to hear more about that in a minute from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. But that's the test. So that's right. Well, look, we haven't gotten to the test. I gave you the 4 items on the test. What about if we made a test? Right? We could call it the Don't Make the Black Kids Angry Symbolic Racism Test. 1. Do you believe in reality? 2. Do you believe black criminality is wildly out of proportion compared to white criminality? 3. Do you believe black criminality is even more wildly disproportionate than Asian criminality? 4. Why do Asian immigrants who come here without speaking English and don't have any money, all they do is work, save, invest, and do all these other things on that list? Why do they do so well? Why do they do way better than black people? Is there some kind of hidden racism in there? Do you think black people are different than white people? Do you think black people should be asked to take personal responsibility for everything that they do? Do you think we should give black people special treatment to get into colleges by giving them more points on their SATs? Well, do you? Do any of these questions seem to, we're asking you obvious questions. We're asking you questions that They talk about very fundamental levels of fairness. Remember, I said fairness. I didn't say equality. What was the quote I heard the other day? It said, fair is not equal, and equal is not fair. I know a lot of reporters. A lot. And the idea that reporters are following Donald Trump around the White House, asking if there's something wrong with his level of mental functioning is just, it's a joke. I mean, reporters are some of the goofiest, most unstable people you can imagine. And that's one quality I don't appreciate in many reporters is the same quality I don't appreciate in lots of liberals. Total lack of self-awareness. I mean, they're the ones that don't have a social life. They're the ones that, aren't very successful in a lot of different levels. If they see somebody who is successful on a lot of different levels and they look at them and they find his life somehow does not measure up to their standards. They don't even have standards. What they have is envy. And so somehow that translates into the fact that Trump's a racist because he doesn't want to let people in this country who have no business being here. Remember, the reporters that want to let unlimited immigration from Haiti are the same people that say, yeah, if you want to go to Harvard, a black person should get a 450-point advantage over an Asian person on the SAT. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But one of my favorite stories to talk about is when we hoist the journalists, we hoist the liberal institutions on their own petard. I mean, there's a big story this week out of Milwaukee. It says, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has one of the worst black-white achievement gaps in the United States. Here's what the university is doing about it. This is a very, very, very long story, but it looks at people, black people that have been to the university, that have flunked out, come back, got their degree. The first guy that looked at is like he was in there he was a student for 11 years, which I'm pretty sure beats my brother John's record at the University of Delaware. But they kind of give you this sob story. But here's the thing, when you're writing a long story as a reporter, if you keep writing the story, if the story goes on long enough, at some point it becomes impossible not to let a little bit of truth escape. I remember when I was in San Diego, my buddy was a bullfighter. He was the only American bullfighter. He owned a restaurant in San Diego. I'm not going to tell you his name. If you want to find out, just look up what I just told you. You'll see who it is. So he was going to be doing his last bullfight, a charity bullfight at a private ring in Mexico. I forget the name. It's about 75 miles east of San Diego and over across the border. So I said to the editor of San Diego Magazine, hey, our mutual buddy, he's going to be doing his last bullfight. Hey, why don't I go down there and see what's up? So I had written stuff about this guy before. We were big friends. My articles still hang inside of his restaurant in downtown San Diego. Yay! Right next to a big picture of Yo-Yo Ma. Yay! Anyway, be surprised how few people care about that, including me anymore. And so I went out there, big piece of property. It was a private ranch, private bull ring. It's weird. I don't know what this ranch was really used for. All I know is that we had to go through 5 guarded checkpoints. When we were in Mexico, complete with dudes with guns, glaring looks, the whole thing. So there's probably 500-600 people there. I think it was a charity event. Anyway, so we get out there, and I don't know what I thought bullfighting was. I'd never been to one before. I thought somehow it was going to have some kind of Ernest Hemingway Death in the Afternoon, really cool thing about it. No, I was totally 100% wrong. It was just a bunch of people torturing bulls, just a bunch of Mexicans sitting in the stands drinking beer and having fun watching bulls get tortured. Yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't anything cool, nothing elegant, nothing cultural, nothing ancient about it. That's what it was. So I'd been planning on doing this big story with lots of photographs for San Diego Magazine and go back to the editor. And I said, listen, I can do 300 words on this story, what just happened out there. And I can say our buddy is, brave and brave beyond reason. And he's a really cool guy with a great place. And this is unusual that he's an American matador, blah, blah, blah. I said, I can do that for 300 words. But at word 301, I'm calling bullshit on the whole enterprise. So I'm just going to do 300 words. Well, the author of this article, they went way over 300 words. And so if you read it carefully, you'll see the truth kind of slips out. So they're talking about this black and white achievement gaps. And in universities, this is what you learn at the University of Wisconsin, especially Madison, which is one of the biggest, most liberal, intensely liberal places in the country. What you learn is, if there's any difference between black people and white people in schools or jobs or anywhere else, there's only one reason only for that. That is white racism. Black people in their own personal responsibility, personal behavior don't have anything to do with it. But that's what's interesting. That's what's interesting about this story is that, wow, this paper is actually suggesting that this guy had something to do with the fact that he spent 11 years trying to get an undergraduate degree in some kind of social media / journalism. Well, we found out that he got tripped up by college math. He didn't ask for help. He didn't have an advisor or a mentor. Complications. And of course, he needed money. And, he was, of course, later on in the article, he goes, yeah, well, as a freshman, I probably partied it up too much. At the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, only 21% of the black people who enroll graduate in 6 years. That number is 45% for white people. That's about one of the worst in the country. And this is Milwaukee. So the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee's a chocolate city now. And this college is basically run as a safe sanctuary for black people to give them some skills to get out there and get a job, because everybody knows the only reason that black people do not have these high-paying jobs is because universities have been keeping them down. So the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, they removed all those obstacles. I mean, if you graduated from high school, you're getting in. I mean, they basically let anybody in that college, especially if you are black and from Milwaukee. Then all the Poindexters out there are surprised when 6 years later, when it turns out you've lowered the admission standards to ridiculously low levels. Well, only 1 out of 5 people are graduating in 6 years. Students' reasons for not finishing or graduating are myriad. They may not do well in courses required to get into their majors. They may not build a relationship with their advisors. Others are forced to drop out because of family issues or financial problems. Man, everybody's got issues. I've got issues. Everybody's got issues. You either go to college or you don't. If your issues get in the way, don't blame us. They're your issues. Deal with them. Get your butt to class. Learn. I don't care if you have to go study under the streetlight at 2 a.m. If that's what life is telling you to do, get out there and do it. And don't come back to me telling me that the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is a bad place. That's what the people who work there say. Like this idea that there's this enormous disparity between black and white people is, unbelievably bad, says the new chancellor. Lots of black students have trouble with math, says this article. So they did this, they did that. And they created all these math courses that the fellas can pass. So the guy they focused on comes forward and says, yeah, wasn't really into going to class when I was a freshman. So the writer is all down with the fact that because there's disparity, there's racism, but when, somehow it slipped out that, I can't figure out why I didn't really do better in school. Do you suppose not going to class had anything to do with it? So he gets out of school with $50,000 in student loans and a degree in some kind of media studies. So he's working for one of these PR firms or marketing companies, helping them with their social media. I'm telling you something, that's a brutal world. You better be damn good at that. You better be good. Because if you're not, everybody's going to know everything. Boy, the online marketing, the online advertising, everybody knows what's working and what is not. So if you're doing something, if your genius thing is, oh yeah, let's do this, let's do that. No, everybody is going to know exactly what you did that worked or not. Here they did same kind of story about a female, first generation college student. She holds a degree in social work. After she got out, she basically got a job as a secretary with the local welfare department. Like many other students of Kalla, Alcantar needed a support network, people she could turn to for not only for academic advice, but for encouragement and a sense of belonging. Parentheses. I needed a lot of black people to party with because I'm black. I'm really racially conscious and I don't really like white people that much. Okay? They're always doing crazy shit like studying. They're always doing stuff like forming study groups with really smart people. They're learning more than what the classroom requires. And they don't listen to a lot of rap music. So you want me to hang around with them. Are you crazy? We now leave the translation of that article from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and return to the article. I didn't have a lot of people in my life who helped me stay motivated. I didn't believe I could do it. I didn't try. I didn't try to fight it or prove myself until much later. She never asked questions. She didn't want anybody to know that she didn't know what was going on. Nobody, I'll tell you something. It's amazing how many times I've been in a meeting. Like when you're a PR guru or a communications guru, you find yourself in meetings with people who actually know what's going on in their field. And so, people used to hire me and it wasn't like, hey, Colin, do you know anything about home building or land development or solar panels or desalination or, dozens of other industries? No, I don't know a damn thing about it. And you don't really have to because, I got to learn what you guys are doing and translate it into other people who don't know anything about it. It's amazing how during these meetings, I won't bore you with the details, but I'd ask a dumb question, a dumb basic question. But it was the dumb basic question that was kind of festering in the room that a lot of other people wanted to know the answer to, the big experts, but they didn't want to appear dumb either. So the young lady said, she sat behind rows of mostly white students. She perceived, rightly or wrongly, that they rolled their eyes when anyone asked the professor a question. Quote, this is what she says, not only are you African American, you are the one person who doesn't get it. You don't want to be the one supporting the stereotype. You want to prove yourself. But you still don't understand. No, ask the stupid question. Get prepared. Ask the question. And if you don't ask the question, don't blame your blackness. Don't blame my whiteness. She works as an administrative specialist for the Waukesha County Child Support Services. I'm a secretary. Look, nothing wrong with being a secretary. You just went 4 years to college to learn all this stuff that you don't use on your job. Capiche? When you work for the government, everybody's into that little piece of paper. And that's what I think these stories of these two kids are we just learned about. It's all about the piece of paper. Get the paper, get on the ladder, and get a job with the government. You're going to go up the ladder, however limited, that's what's going to happen to you. Even if you're studying something you're not really good at, even if you're studying something you're not really into that much. So you get one of those jobs, you went to a college you're not really into, get a job you're not really into, 5 years into it, you got it all figured out. Man, these white people really suck making me do this job I'm not really into. Because they don't like black people. For many students, says the paper, it's hard to find the sense of belonging and believing that leads to success, says Gary Cooper, a senior advisor in the African American Academic Student Services. Okay, here's the money graph. Are you ready? What I'm about to say would probably get this guy kicked off YouTube. Quote, this is a quote from Gary Cooper. Being around negativity plays into your psyche. Quote, he said, quote, I'm still unlearning the negative things I grew up with in the black culture. Being college ready requires being both academically and mentally ready. The students who make it through see someone else who made it to the other side. What the hell does that mean? Unlearning the negative things I grew up with in the black culture. Could you be referring to this pervasive attitude of anti-intellectualism where anybody who tries to make themselves better themselves is condemned, scorned, mocked, assaulted, as somehow being white? Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about this enormous level of anti-white hostility among black people that is directed even at black people if they do not conform to the latest BET idea of what a black person looks like and acts like? In the journalism racket, that's what we call burying the lead. Letting the lead, writing a really long story and putting the lead way down at the end. That's the most interesting thing in the article. What is he talking about? I mean, what he just said is not something anybody would ever say in a classroom at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Because there is no such thing as a negative thing in the black culture. No, there's only white racism. That's what's keeping you down. And down, and down, and down, and down. So let's get back to our tests there for a minute. Every single person taking that test at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee would probably pass it with flying colors, yet they still have unbelievably dismal record of performance when it comes time to getting black people a decent education. What are we to conclude from that? Are we to conclude that people that answer those questions, that take the symbolic racism test, that talk about relentless black victimization, are we to conclude that those same people are actually doing a lot more damage than good on an epic level? Oh, hell yeah. I don't believe black people are responsible for their own behavior. I believe it's white people keeping them down. Those white people that are expecting black people to act like Italians, Poles, Jews, everybody else came over here. That's not reasonable because we know black people are not responsible for their own behavior. We cannot have that. Those people are in charge of the institutions where black people are doing the worst. They would take the symbolic racism test and pass it. The people who pass it are the ones responsible for the biggest bits of nastiness. That was all about Milwaukee. The University of Wisconsin does not get more liberal than that. It's even more liberal than Berkeley. Why don't we go to another example? This is in the paper. The Wisconsin thing's in the paper yesterday. This is in the paper today, out of Sacramento. Another liberal capital. Good Lord, this is the capital of the Republic of California. This is where up is down, black is white, left is right, right is left. Circles are squares, squares are circles. You get my drift. This is Sacramento. This is where the mayor says we're not going to arrest our way out of this mess. We are not going to criminalize homelessness. And that's why when you walk the streets of Sacramento, under every single bridge, you see dozens and dozens of homeless people in Sacramento. That comes direct from some of our Sacramento viewers. But the same problems that they have at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, the same kind of people have the same kind of problems in Sacramento. Let's give that a listen.
We have the best employees working at our city to achieve our goals, and I don't think we're doing that now.
The city of Sacramento is taking a hard look at its hiring practices.
We have a lot of work to do. I'm not happy with the results of that audit.
Realizing it's falling short to employ minorities and women, as well as paying them fairly.
I don't believe there's a single soul in the city of Sacramento doing this intentionally, but there is clearly some implicit bias.
Female city employees make less than the average salary, with men making $20,000 more than women, while Sacramento's fire and police departments are struggling in diversity. The city auditor reporting the percentage of white employees in the department is more than twice that of the city population. Sacramento City Fire is starting a new outreach program to close that gap.
Reaching out to lower income people who would not otherwise have an opportunity to go to these types of classes, get their EMT license, get some fire science classes, and then go into the fire academy.
While Police Chief Daniel Hahn believes the root of the problem stems from getting cadets to graduate.
The last academy that just graduated, 7 people got kicked out of the academy. 100% were either ethnically or gender diverse. They basically treat every single academy recruit the same and as if they learn at the same rate, and I just don't believe that's the case. So that ends up kicking some of our diversity out of the academies.
The city taking a hard look at problems today for solutions tomorrow.
If we're not doing a good job of recruiting a diverse population, we may be missing out on some of the best employees. They may be going elsewhere.
Love that story. Loved it. Every single person you heard from is down with the cause. Every single one. And do you think it just came to them like yesterday that, hey, maybe we should start hiring some more fellas and some more whatever we can around here because that's what we do. We're into the racial identity thing. But maybe we should do that. No. People have been doing that for 35 to 40 years. Capiche? That's what they've been practicing in Sacramento. It's their religion. Now, after 40 years of this, they look around and go, hey, we don't have any black people around here. What's up with that? Of course, the people who are responsible, the city council, the same people so eager to imply racism in other people when they see some kind of disparity. Oh, no. They're like, oh, no, we didn't do nothing. That one girl goes, that one woman on the city council that we heard, she goes, well, I don't believe anybody in this organization is racist. It's really implicit bias. You know what? If that's not the scariest expression you've ever heard in your life, right after depolicing, it better be. I mean, this is full-on George Orwell thought control, mind reading. We're going to read your mind and, take legal measures against you because of the mind reading we just did. Even though we can't really read minds. If you talk to cops, they'll tell you, you got to pass 3 tests to be a cop. Mental, first really physical. Physical, mental, and kind of a personal test. You got to be able to, climb over a wall or whatever physical things you got to do. Do a little running. Emotional, they have to take these tests. Are you a nut job? Are you a sociopath? Are you a killer who just wants a badge? The third test is, so, we're going to put you in charge of enforcing the rules. How do you deal with the rules in your own life? Do you have credit problems? Do you do drugs? Do you have friends who do drugs? How'd you do in school? That's why there's only 7 people in that academy. Well, that's why all those 7 got kicked out. But there were a lot of people who were trying to get in, couldn't get in, because there comes a point, whether you're in Sacramento or Minneapolis or Wilmington, Delaware, or Chicago, there's only so much you can lower the standards. There's only so much you can lower the standards. And we heard that. You couldn't see him on this podcast, but I think that was the chief of police there. 7 people we kicked out were ethnically and something diverse. Every single person we just heard in that story, every single one would pass that test with flying colors, the symbolic racism test. We get guys going, well, because they're poor, they haven't had the opportunity to take these classes. No, community colleges in California are mostly free. And what's not free, you can pay with student loans or Pell Grants. And so, if you're going to sit here and tell me that there are no opportunities for people of color, I'm going to say, oh yeah, there's a ton of opportunities. People of color do not want to take advantage of them for reasons of their own. Well, white people are keeping them down. No, they're trying to blame white people for their own shortcomings. Guess what? I've got enough crap to blame myself for. I'm not going to let anybody blame me for their crap. Okay? Capiche? I mean, I think a lot of people are like that. It's like, okay, something bad, looking at my own life. I'm not a perfect person. I became reconciled to that a long time ago. I'll take full responsibility for everything in my life. No, don't ask me to take your stuff into my life. I'm not going to do that. By the way, people who do that, that's a mental illness. If you take responsibility for stuff that's not your fault and you bring it into your life and you make it your problem when it's not your problem, that means you are mentally ill. I just described in detail what a codependent is. A person who helps an alcoholic maintain their alcoholic lifestyle. Somebody knocks on the door or calls on the phone. Hey, where's Joey? He didn't come to work today. Oh, Joey's got the flu. Joey sprained his ankle. Joey's grandmother died 4th time this year. Joey, our son is sick. That's codependent. Now we get all these people we just saw talking about why there are not enough black people working for the city of Sacramento, and somehow it's the fault of implicit bias because there aren't enough opportunities for black people for some mysterious reason. There's no mystery. Anybody can go to those community colleges out there anytime they want, learn any damn thing they want, including EMT, including police work. That's a fact. Yeah, good old Colin lived in California for 35 years. I know what kind of people go to Sacramento. I know what kind of people work for the California state government. Sacramento is a company town. And if you are not down with the cause, if the cause is not your religion, you are not going to be working in that town. Okay? That's the way it works in Sacramento. But Sacramento, like lots of other towns in California now, is starting to crumble because this little bubble this little fantasy bubble everybody's created around black people and other, Mexicans or poor people or the homeless people, it's all crashing with reality. You can ignore the reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring the reality, says Ayn Rand. That's what they're trying to do in Sacramento. That's what they're trying to convince us they're not doing in Sacramento with this story. Story where everybody passed the test. Oh yes, I'm a good person. I believe that somehow white racism has prevented black people from working as hard as Asian people. It has stopped black people from studying in school and learning something. This is the religion. This is the religion. This is the unexamined religious faith of a huge chunk of people in this country today. We just saw at least 2 examples of it in the news today. Doing an enormous amount of damage, not only to us who are the victims of this criminality and mayhem and chaos that's inflicted on us by these sociopaths, but it's also hurting the people it's supposed to help. Do you think you're doing somebody a favor by helping them avoid the consequences of their own disastrous decisions? You think that? In my little state, the big headline today was, hooray, 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 we're getting rid of cash bail. We're not going to criminalize poverty anymore. I mean, so how do these conversations go? Somebody shows up in court and they go, the judge goes, hey, Carl, Your Honor, I don't have any money for bail. Well, why don't you have money for bail? Well, it's because I've been too busy bonking people over the head and robbing them to actually keep a job, Your Honor. If you believe that poverty causes crime, and you've been watching that movie, Les Miserables, way too much. But I want to put this on your radar screen. I want to let your head pop with this idea. What if crime causes poverty? What if a criminal lifestyle, the things you learn in a criminal lifestyle, causes poverty? What if those qualities that make a person a criminal, successful or not, just have no value in the real world? The qualities of not keeping your word, not being dependable, not showing up. Because that's what's happening. And I don't need to take any stupid made-up test by these psychologists who are sicker than everybody they're dealing with every day. Top of that list are those reporters who go around chasing Trump around the White House going, shrieking, "Are you racist? Are you racist?" Joe Scarborough, Mika. "You're a liar." No, he's not. He's a racist. So that's the only thing they disagree on Scarborough, whether Trump is a bigger liar or a bigger racist. And they talk about that nonstop on MSNBC, CNN, PBS, all over the damn place. They're quite happy with themselves, even though they don't have ratings, as Sarah Huckabee pointed out the other day. They don't really care because ratings aren't really the point. The big point is not making the black kids angry.